to have you joining me on the podcast today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I am very excited for the conversation we're about to have.
Oh my goodness. I have been looking forward to this conversation since we booked this in a couple of weeks ago. And even just chatting to you before we got recording made me even more excited. I can tell you have just so much experience and such incredible stories. And I know a lot of what you shared today is going to really deeply resonate with our listeners. But before we dive into anything, do you want to go ahead and just give everyone listening a little bit of an introduction as to who you are and how you got to where you are today?
Yep. So I am a success strategist who will brainwash you for your success. So my work is kind of twofold. I do a lot of external strategy. How do you build the goals that you have in your business and in your life? And also, what are the subconscious programs that are running from your childhood? As I say, like the outdated operating system that we're all running off of that are holding you back from truly achieving the success that you want to achieve. So I'm kind of a combination success strategist and hypnotherapist.
Oh my goodness. I love that so much. And how did you get into this work?
My entrepreneurial journey started pretty young. It was very much an accident. I did not set out to ever do what I'm doing. I mean, let's be honest, based on our brains, right? Our brains are operating at the level of an 8-year-old. My 8-year-old self would not, I mean, she didn't even know that this was a possibility in the world, right? So a lot of my journey has been following the breadcrumbs. So I got 2 degrees in fashion design. I came back to the States, was living in an area near Seattle that doesn't have much of a fashion industry, and was like, how do I keep my skills alive? How do I keep doing what I love to do while, I sacrifice my soul and make money? And so I started a fashion label in 2007, and it was one-off bridesmaids dresses and flower girl dresses and prom dresses and homecoming dresses. And then pretty soon I did my first collection. And then after that, I got invited to do my first runway show where I won my first award. And then like things just kept building. And over the course of 8 years, I was dressing celebrities. I had moved my label to LA. I was selling on Zappos.com. Like all of these amazing things were happening. And behind the scenes, I was miserable. I was bouncing back and forth every single day between running a marathon on a hamster wheel and in the fetal position, crying my eyes out in bed. Like those were the only 2 existences that I had. And March 2015, I was meditating and I was finally quiet enough for the universe to be like, girl, stop. This isn't it. Fashion is not it. Shut your business down and walk away from it now. And 72 hours later, I closed my business. And then had the spaciousness to say, okay, what now? Because I didn't have a plan B. And I kept applying for jobs and I was overqualified for everything. And I was like, all right, well, apparently I'm still going to be an entrepreneur. What does this now look like moving forward? And I realized I had been cleaning up my email inbox, and women had been emailing me for years saying, can you teach me to do what you've done in your business? Not in the fashion business, but just in general. Like, how have you gotten hooked up with celebrities? How have you gotten the press you've gotten? How have you gotten the sales you've gotten? How have you started selling on such like a major retailer? And I was like, well, what if I started teaching women the things that I know about energy, manifestation, mindset, success? So I started doing this 10 years ago, last month. And I'm in another, as we were kind of talking about, growth point in my business, getting ready to expand. And I don't want to say pivot. It's not a full pivot, but it's more of a refinement. Because I've realized over the last few months, like I'm okay in my business. I'm not unhappy, but I'm also like not really happy. And so now I'm diving back in again and saying, I'm not shutting it down. I'm not starting from zero again. But in the entrepreneurial journey, I'm growing. My business has to grow with me. What does the next 10 years, what does the next decade of my business look like?
What a journey. Oh my goodness. I think we're going to have a lot of people resonating with this for sure. And, what you were saying about when you were designing the bridesmaids dresses, and you kind of got caught on that hamster wheel. I see that happen to a lot of jewelry designers, and I've been there as well, where you just kind of get so caught up in the day to day of like building this business that you forget to kind of step into your role as CEO, and you forget to like embrace that CEO identity. A lot of the people I work with, jewelry business owners, jewelry artists, a lot of them like to call themselves, really have a lot of friction around even the identity of being a CEO. They got into this to get away from the corporate jargon, to get away from that structure. But if you don't, in my experience, if you don't really acknowledge that you need to get yourself into a position where you are running the business and you're not running like a hamster on this hamster wheel that you can't get off, it does lead to resentment. It leads to burnout. And it's a very sad thing when that happens, when it's something that you are so passionate and so excited about. So,
ask me the last time I touched a sewing machine.
Yeah.
Right? Like 8 years of that was my entire life. And now for the last 10 years, I just had to hem some curtains the other day, but like, that's not, like I thought about making my wedding dress in October and I was like, that's not happening, like, and I completely resonate with what you're saying. And there are so many people that are like, well, I just want to make jewelry. And it is true that making jewelry is a completely different experience than being a jewelry business owner.
Oh, yeah, 100%. So, one of the things we work with our clients, and every business is slightly different. We're looking at their whys for starting their business, because for some people, they're in it just for the money. For some people, it's for that flexibility or the sense of purpose it gives them. Or, they like making this part of the jewelry, but this part they're happy to outsource. It looks very different for everyone, but it's a very emotional thing, letting go of tasks so that you can step into that role of CEO. It's also a very difficult thing. I was speaking to a client recently who's done so incredibly well in her business, and she has such resistance to seeing herself as a boss, seeing herself as a boss who has a team under her, even though she's like fully ready to have this team. Her business is ready for her. And it's just interesting the mindset blocks we have to like actually embracing that role, and it can really hold us back in business, holds us back in life. So what does that actually look like when a business owner steps into the role of CEO? And what would you say to like, jewelry business owners who are used to doing everything themselves?
Yeah. So a huge part of it, and really a lot of the things I work with my clients on, is some of it is having to let go of control. Mm-hmm. As well, because if someone else is making your jewelry, you don't have the control over how it turns out. Now, of course, there are quality control checks and things like that, right, that you build into your business, but you're not the one making it. I also happen to I have a photo booth business in the city in which I live as well. And we had an event yesterday that was the first event that I'm not in town. Mm. And so I had to let go of control enough to trust that this new person that I just hired could do it and could be the face of the company and could like go out there, because it wasn't me there. Mm-hmm. And that his touch at that event would be exactly what people needed, right? And I found out yesterday we got 4 new leads that now want to book us and hire us, right? And so part of it is letting go of that control and trusting that just because you can do it in your business doesn't mean you need to be the one doing it. In fact, if there are things that are kind of like wash, rinse, repeat, if there are things that are like, add this fastener, close this loop, do this thing, those are things that you actually don't need to be doing. Mm-hmm. And someone else could possibly do it better or quicker than you, more efficiently than you, and freeing yourself up to then be the visionary of the business. If the word CEO doesn't resonate with you and you have the calling for that level business, find a different word. And then also you have to unpack and deconstruct all of the things from before the age of 8 in your subconscious. Like, for example, if you saw a parent struggling with a boss and the boss was a terrible person, or if your parent felt like a boss and they, weren't a great parent or whatever, right? Like your mind is going to tell you stories about how like being a CEO is bad, or all CEOs are evil, or, CEOs are just in it for the money and I care too much about my business to be a CEO. It's really important that we also do that subconscious deconstruction work because our subconscious rules 95% of our brain. And so I always say it's like pushing, if you're trying to become a CEO without addressing the CEO, like subconscious programming, you're basically trying to push a boulder up a mountain with a toothpick. And so I always say, like, yes, absolutely do all the external work that you need to do to set that up for yourself. But also then what is your subconscious rule book, your operating system saying about what it means to be a CEO or who CEOs are in the world or your capability of being a CEO so that you can write a new rule book that where your mind is on board with helping you get to that destination.
Yeah, this is so fascinating, Bri, because, I see this play out all the time, even just with our clients in the Jewelry Business Academy. The reality is like, you've built businesses, there's steps for actually like building awareness, getting customers. Like if you break them down, they're very simple steps. Like building a business is actually just an accumulation of thousands of teeny tiny, easy, doable steps, in my opinion. But it doesn't matter how simple those steps are. It's the blocks that we have to actually going and doing them, like the blocks to being visible and being seen and being the face of our brand or stepping into the role of CEO. Those blocks feel so big and so heavy, and so often we're not even conscious of like why we're not able to do this thing, or why we're like, okay, I'll do that, but I'll just do it like kind of 1/10 of what I know I should be doing because I don't feel worthy of this, or because I've told myself this story for years that CEOs are bad, or wanting to make a lot of money is bad, or money's evil, or whatever that story is. So for someone listening who's like, oh, what if maybe the stories that I'm holding on to are holding me back, how do they even get started in like deconstructing that?
So the first thing is to bring in awareness. And one of the hard things, I call these things invisible walls, because it's like you're walking, you like run into something, but there's nothing there, right? Mm-hmm. And then you're trying to take another step and there's another invisible wall there and another invisible wall there. And so what is hard is that they're invisible. Yeah. And it's like a fish swimming in water. They don't necessarily know that they're in water. We don't actively recognize the oxygen that's all around us all the time. And our subconscious programming is very much like that. So awareness is the first thing. If you aren't aware and you don't know how to become aware, some of the things to look for are if a coach is saying to you, hey, go do this thing. And you're like, yeah, but, or I can't because, or like, look at the resistance, look at the narratives, look at how you're failing to, and I don't say failing, I don't like that word, how you're unable to do the things because your brain is talking you out of it all the time. Mm-hmm. Those are the things to become aware of. Now, once we become aware of those, what I do in hypnotherapy is we go into the subconscious and we say, okay, we know that this thing is blocking you. Let's let the subconscious show us where the root of that is coming from. So now a lot of people will try to do this with mindset, which you can absolutely try. Most people I know have not had much success with mindset. And the reason is because mindset's only 5% of the puzzle. I don't know about you. If I'm betting on something and I have a 95% chance of winning, I'm going to choose that every single time. So we go into the subconscious and say, what is the experience that created this rule in our operating system? And then we shift the perspective. We say, okay, well, that's what the 8-year-old self or younger, the 1-year-old self, the 2-year-old self perceived as being the truth, but what's the actual truth? Then once we've found that, then we do the reprogramming. The brain learns through repetition. So the way I do hypnotherapy is that you have to repeat the new thing over and over and over and over and over again. My people do it for 30 days. Mm-hmm. And so you're literally like teaching your brain a new language. If you were to say, look at a 2,500 word speech just once, could you memorize the whole thing? 2,500 words? No. You have to do it. I've given a TED talk, right? Like you have to look, I spent months just practicing over and over and over again, the words on the page. And so our brain needs that time to then reinforce it. So whether you're trying to do it consciously or you're doing it subconsciously, that daily reinforcement is a non-negotiable because you're literally teaching your brain a brand new language.
That makes so much sense. And that repetition, I mean, in so many parts of business is so crucial, but especially around this type of work. So can you give us an example that would be relevant to maybe a jewelry business owner who, let's use the CEO example, because we're wanting everyone to like step into that role of CEO, and anyone who's listening who has resistance to that, not everyone needs to step into that role. But for most people who are building a business, they're building it because they ultimately want that freedom to do what they want on their own terms. And the only way to do that is to start working on your business rather than in the day-to-day in your business. So for someone who's just got that resistance to like stepping into that role and building their team and whatever that may look like, as lean as that team may look like, what would you like? Can you give us an example of what that would look like, the daily thing for 30 days?
Yeah. So I had a client come to me and she really wanted to be an entrepreneur. She really wanted to have her own business. She was working for someone else, and she realized she had this core belief that like she had to have a 9-to-5 in order to have a salary or in order to have an income. And so we went in, we did the hypnosis. She started listening to the reprogramming track. And 2 months after our session, she called me and she said, I just signed a $50,000 client in my business. Wow. And so what the repetition looks like is it's basically, and I write all the scripts, whether it's someone working with me privately, I custom write the script, or I have a bunch of different hypnoses for things like heal your fear of failure, heal your burnout, become your future self, give yourself permission to succeed, like all sorts of different ones. And the reprogramming track is basically 15 minutes of getting you to not only visualize in your mind's eye, the you that's doing all the things that a CEO would do, but it's also getting you to feel it and to embody it in the actual physical cells of your body. And I do things, I bring in white light and I bring in, visualization techniques and somatic techniques and all sorts of things so that we can literally give you the opportunity to essentially practice your future every single day. And I ask people this a lot, like, when is the last time you practiced your future?
Yeah, that is
most
such
of
a
us,
great question, because most of us don't.
We don't. And the thoughts that we think, so the practice that we're practicing every single day, what is it, like 90% of the thoughts we think are the same thoughts we thought yesterday? So we're consistently practicing our yesterdays. But how often are you carving out time to practice your future?
Oh my goodness, this is so powerful because, we are, as you said, all living in the subconscious most of the time, and we're just kind of reacting to life as it happens to us. And, I think some people have such big dreams that they don't even allow themselves to explore and then like to think about what it would look like to live at that place where you have this business making XYZ, where you feel however you feel on your day-to-day in your business. So I think that's such a reminder. And I think what happens as well, and I think we touched on this earlier, Bri, but we get into that place in business often, and I see this with a lot of jewelry designers, where we feel pressure to constantly be doing and hustling in order to grow. So we're posting, we're producing, we're pitching. How do you help entrepreneurs shift from that overworking and underliving kind of state to something that's more sustainable?
So the first thing is, I always love proof because it shows us like facts. We can't really argue with facts, right? Mm-hmm. If you look at the most successful business people in the world, they did not get there through hard work. They got there through smart work. They built teams around them. They brought people onto their teams that were smarter than they were. They set up systems, they set up operations, they put boundaries in place. Like the most successful business owners in the world, yeah, do they work hard? Yeah, they we work hard, but not in that way where we're breaking ourselves and where we're burning ourselves out and where we're sacrificing ourselves in pursuit of our visions. We're working hard. I just wrote down on the piece of paper next to me today. I will read it to you because it was a great realization for me. Hold on, where'd it go? I was just looking at this earlier. Now I'm not going to be able to find it, y'all. The question was along the lines of, what would it look like for me to, in the next 10 years, build a 7-figure business based on my knowledge rather than my time and energy? And what if that could be a possibility, right? So if you're someone who's like, no, I have to do more, I have to work harder, I have to, like, you can't hard work yourself into the next level. There's a brilliant book. If anyone wants to read a book about this, it's called 10X is Easier Than 2X.
Yeah.
And I know people are like mathing the math and they're like, but if I'm doing 10 times more, when you want to 10X your business, you actually do 80% less, which people don't get. And so like, I present that as just like a what if. And in your journey, sit with that question. Like, what if you could 10X your business by doing 80% less? What if you could build a 7-figure business based off your knowledge and expertise rather than your time and energy? Like, what if? The only person saying that's impossible on your journey right now is probably you.
Yeah.
Because a lot of other people have done it.
Oh, yeah. I'm so glad you brought this up, Bri. And, I've experienced that myself as well. And it's what I see people tell, again, the story they tell themselves is, oh, I don't want to grow my big business bigger than what it is right now because I'm already working so hard. I'm already so busy. There's no way I have capacity for that. And exactly like you said, like as you scale your business, when you are able to 10X it, you have the team in place, you have the systems, you have way more support, and you actually work less hours. You're still working hard in any business, but you're working less hours. You're working on like key things that only you need to be doing or directing or managing, but you're not doing the day-to-day things. So you actually reclaim so much of your time. You're able to be way more protective of your energy, and you're able to get your business to that place where it's like, oh, if I got into this business because I really want to be doing part of the making process, well, now you have the time to go do that, but you also have the team and support and systems to be able to be scaling at a pace that you wouldn't have been able to do on your own.
Yeah.
So I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think a lot of people, when they hear like 10X, they're like, oh my gosh, no, that's like ridiculous, or there's no way I can handle it, or, I'm in it not for the money, I just want like time with my family. And they don't recognize that 10Xing your business is going to give you so much more freedom.
Yeah. And think about like the way that they break it down in the book, and we've all heard this before, is that 20% of what you're currently doing is producing 80% of the results. Which means that 80% of what you're doing is producing next to no results whatsoever.
Yeah.
And it's all busy work. It's giving you really good dopamine hits. You're feeling good about yourself, because those of us who are high achievers tend to couple our value with our productivity, which, another invitation, those two things, not related. Your value does not come from how much you get done each day. So
I'm so glad you shared that, because I can share a personal experience actually of dealing with that as I've grown. I'm in my second business now. I used to be a jewelry designer as well, and then I moved into the coaching world. But when I got to the stage of having like growing my team and letting go of a lot of the day-to-day tasks, I actually got kind of depressed at one stage and got kind of down, because I'd opened up so much time and I only had to work on some like key things. I was still working hard, but I wasn't doing the like mundane day-to-day like little things that would fill up my time. And by the end of the day, I'd like give myself a pat on the back and be like, oh, you look how hard you've worked, look how much you've done. And I got to the point where I wasn't doing as much, and I wasn't doing all these little things that add up, that don't take as much brain power. So you can work on them for hours at a time. And I was doing more of the strategic thing. And I felt down. And I really, really struggled to embrace the new amounts of space and time that I had in my life. And it took a lot of work actually to like let go of the guilt and let go of the that sense of my value is equated with how busy and how much I'm producing on a day-to-day basis. And it's funny because I was actually producing higher quality stuff that only I could be doing, like content and coaching and stuff, but I wasn't doing the little day-to-day like admin emails and all the millions of things that go on behind the scenes of running a business. And it's hard to navigate that.
I mean, I describe it like an addiction.
Mm-hmm.
We are addicted to getting shit done. I mean, come on, how good does it feel? I will put stuff on my checklist that I've already done just to check it off.
Yeah.
Right? Like, how many of us can relate to this? And especially high achievers. We were conditioned from a very, very, very young age that our value and our straight A's, right, in high school came from doing more, from extra credit, from like all these things. And again, look at the most successful people. They're not, their value is not at all related to how much they get done each day.
Oh yeah.
A visionary's value is in their ability to lead. It's in their ability to come up with innovative solutions. It's in their ability to take risks and put themselves out there. Like, that's the value of a CEO, visionary, business leader, that has nothing to do with the 500 things that are currently on your to-do list right now that make you feel really good, but don't really get you anywhere.
What would you say, Bri, is like one piece of advice for someone listening to this who's resonating with like what we're saying, and they're like, oh, you know what? I'm identifying with that. When I've hired my team and I'm starting to like let go of some things, I feel like I need to fill that space with something else to actually feel worthy of the business I'm building. What would be one piece of advice that you can give them?
So I recommend scheduling space into your calendar, because I don't know about you, it's kind of the only way in my life that anything gets done. If it's in my calendar, I show up and I do it. If not, my brain is like, ooh, there's nothing in our calendar. What are we going to do? Let me get distracted here. Let me get distracted there. So I actually schedule space. I schedule creative time. I schedule, like, all of that stuff goes in my calendar and it becomes protected time. It is not a snooze. You're not snoozing your calendar. You're not scheduling stuff over it. You're not ignoring it. If you have an assistant, you let them know that that is non-negotiably protected time. And you give yourself that space to be in your creativity. Whether that looks like, today, I just ate lunch in the sunshine without email, I just sat in silence and ate my lunch in the sunshine. I told you I'm traveling right now. I brought a mindfulness coloring book with me. I have my journal sitting right next to me that I'm writing in all the time. So it's really important, one, schedule it into your calendar. And then two, start doing the inner work around what is my value. If my value is not getting shit done, what is my value? And start playing with just curiosity. What if my value was actually something completely different? What if my value was my presence? What if my value was my keen design sense? What if my value was my ability to lead other people to do what they love and be able to remain in that visionary role? Just start playing with it. One of the things I like to do, we mentioned identity earlier, and I think identity is one of the most underrated elements of entrepreneurship that is out there. I like to call it playing adult dress up, because when we're a kid and we want to be a ballerina, what do?
We dress up.
We throw on a tutu and shabam, we're a ballerina. We want to be a doctor. We throw a stethoscope around our neck and voila, we're a doctor. What if you could start playing with putting on this identity, get curious around, what is my value? And then just play with, what if I got up tomorrow morning and put on the identity of someone whose value is not tied to their to-do list? What if I got up tomorrow morning and put on the identity of a CEO or a visionary? How would that day look different? How would it feel different? What different thoughts would you think? And start becoming, and again, practicing that future and becoming that future version of you.
I love that so, so much. And yeah, I've done something not exactly the same, something similar a few months ago with some of my clients, where I gave them this challenge to look at what would your most successful, most confident, most in flow version of yourself look like in the ideal dream world. Write out and get really clear, what are they wearing? What's their what time are they waking up? How are they getting out of bed? How do they feel when they're getting out of bed? What are they having for breakfast? What do they do? When do they go for a walk? How do they feel as they navigate challenges? Are they reactive? Are they spiraling? Are they getting under the duvet? Or are they oh, this happened. Look, I can handle it easy breezy and I can move on with my day with a lot of grace and flow. And I gave them the challenge to really get clear on that and then go and live as though you're already there. And it's so fascinating how it changes how you show up in business and in life. And it changes how you deal with problems in your business as well, which it's fascinating.
My future self hypnosis is one of my most favorite hypnoses, because it is you get to go talk to your future self and ask them these questions and say and you get it almost from their perspective as well, rather than your perspective, because where you're standing right now and how you're seeing the world right now is at a very specific point in time. Your future self can see the world from a very different perspective. And so you get to go talk to them and you get to say, what are the most important things that you do? How do you feel every day? Who's in your life? How have you set yourself up for success? What do I need to know right now? And then you get to merge with your future self. You get to become them. And then that becomes the repetition, right? Is you waking up every day, seeing through the eyes of your future self, you making decisions every day as your future self. Because to your point, when you can think like your future self, act like your future self, believe like your future self, make decisions, walk through the world, dress, change your hairstyle. I've had clients, they're like, man, my future self was not blonde. I gotta start phasing out the blonde, right? But when you start showing up in all of those ways, guess what? That's no longer your future self.
Yeah.
That's your present self. And then you've collapsed time. And now you just get to live as your future self in the world every single day.
Oh, I love it so much, Bri. And just correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel people think their future self is 10 years away. And by doing this work, you can it can be 90 days from today. You're literally living in that future self. Maybe the revenue in your business isn't there yet, so it can take a little while to catch up. But that shift of our dream version of ourselves is so much closer than we often think.
Well, and the more, again, that we practice and live in that, the quicker the timeline accelerates as well. Yeah, I love this work and I love playing with this stuff. And I always think too, why not do this? It's free for you to do this. I mean, yes, maybe you want to hire someone to help you get into that space. Maybe you want to buy some tools, whatever. But for the most part, you living as your future self, you can do it anytime you want. And then the more you do it, the juicier it gets. And the quicker I told you, I'm currently on this self-imposed retreat in the middle of the Ozarks in Arkansas by myself, house sitting for people that I don't know, with the purpose of being all right, what is the next 10 years going to look like? Who is that version of me? And what am I doing today to be her and become her? What conversations am I having? What partnerships am I building? And I've been here a week. I have 1 week left. And I already feel like a radically different version of myself than the me who drove into this driveway a week ago.
That's so, so powerful. And I want to talk a little bit about how community plays into this, because this has just been my experience is, I spent years building a business where I knew other small business owners and jewelry business owners, but I was not part of like a big community where we were openly being vulnerable and sharing what we're navigating and getting support. And now I have a really beautiful community around me. I literally moved across the country to be closer to this community and to immerse myself around entrepreneurs who are, as you said, like they're running their businesses like CEOs. They have a lot more downtime. They're building very successful businesses. They're very conscious about how they're doing it. And being surrounded by people who get it, by people who are further ahead of you, by people who are very intentional with that version of themselves that they're stepping into, it changes the vision you have for yourself and your future as well. So talk to us a little bit about community and why you like that mindset, which I used to be in, of like, I need to do this all alone to be worthy of success, keeps so many entrepreneurs stuck.
Yep. So oftentimes when we start our entrepreneurial journey, a lot of us were surrounded by people who were not entrepreneurs, right? Or even if they were, I love my mom so much. And her version of entrepreneurship was, as an entrepreneur, you'll never take home a paycheck a day in your life. So keep your day job, right? So as humans in general, we're always trying to be in harmony with each other. We're always trying to be in resonance with each other. So if we are around a lot of people that are like, it's not possible to be a profitable entrepreneur, or it's really hard, or you should just keep your day job, or whatever the narrative is, right? What happens is we tend to just automatically default to harmony with who we're around, right? So then say we work really hard and we're like working on ourselves and we're raising our vibration, we're raising our consciousness, our, personal evolution. And so we're in disharmony with those people. There's two options. They can either rise up to meet us where we are at, which is probably not going to happen, there's three options. Option one, they rise up to meet us, probably not happening. Option two, we stay in disharmony, which is probably also not happening based on our conditioning and just the way that humans work. Probably what's going to happen is we're going to drop down to where they're at again. And we're going to go back to where we used to be energetically, emotionally, mindset wise, belief wise, etc. So when we elevate ourselves, it is so important to have other people who are elevated or even further along than us to help us continue our elevation. That, again, it's this invisible thing. But if all the conversations around you are, this isn't going to work, you're struggling, you're having issues, you could totally go get an easy $70,000 a year job, right? That's going to drag you back down to where you were in the past. So the community that you have around you and the people that you talk to and the conversations you have are literally keeping you at the elevation that you've grown to and helping you elevate even more. I mentioned I'm a little extreme. Obviously, like I just picked up and came to Arkansas for 2 weeks by myself. I left my husband at home and was like, BRB, see you in a bit. I'm also a little bit of a masochist, and like I texted my coach today and I was like, roast me. Hard, like go hard, roast me. I want you to point out to me all of my blind spots, because also in this elevation process, again, like I don't see that I'm in oxygen right now. And so we need other people outside of us to also point out not only our blind spots. I mean, it's helpful to say like, okay, now how am I elevating even more? But also pointing out to us when we're doing well and when we're actually showing up as our future self and reflecting back to us the things they see in us. There are just certain things that we can't do on our own. And I mean, I have had so many conversations in the last week with people around the evolution that I'm currently going through. and gathering perspectives and little bits and pieces. And all of a sudden, last night I was having a conversation with this woman and I was like, do I want to build an exitable business? Like, I would not have come to that on my own if not for this conversation with this woman. Mm-hmm. And I was like, because I've been a solopreneur as I am my brand for 10 years now. That's not an exitable business. I can't sell myself to someone else, right? Mm-hmm. So having other people around us and having the right people around us is literally what helps us keep going and growing, versus having the wrong people around us, which is that crab pot mentality of just like pulling us back down into the boiling water.
It makes a world of difference. And I think what happens is when we get to that point where it's like, okay, I've grown a little bit from the people that I'm around, and I've got this different vision for my life, and I'm just being more intentional with what I'm building, and I'm going into entrepreneurship, and these are people who just don't get the world that I'm going into. There's a lot of guilt in like stepping away and stepping into a new community. Well, what would you say to someone navigating that?
I do want to say and make it very clear that you don't have to exile those people from your life either, right? I mean, my parents my mom has said a few times, she'll ask me like, how do you make money again? And then I started saying, I'm like, yeah, my mom doesn't even understand how I make money. And then she was like, I listened to that podcast episode and I don't know why you say that. And I'm like, and then I told her how I was making money that week. And she was like, that sounds like a scam. And I was like, all right, thanks, Eileen. I love you so much. But obviously, like, I'm not cutting my parents out of my life because they don't get it. They speak a little bit of a different language, but I've found new ways to relate to them that don't involve me bringing my business or my entrepreneur brain into their world. Like, I have friends that are not entrepreneurs that are just friends that I go have fun with. I have a book club that I go do book club with, and we don't read entrepreneurial books, right? Like, I think it's also entrepreneurs tend to get very siloed in entrepreneurship. And in the realm of, as we talked about earlier, this overworking and underliving, like, let yourself be multidimensional as well. You can have people in your life that are maybe just the people you go listen to live music with, or you go play board games with at the local pub, or you go to a movie with once a month or whatever, right? Like, not every single person in your life has to be that elevated entrepreneurial mindset. That's not your entire identity either. So let yourself meet those people where they are. Don't let it drag you down from your entrepreneurial elevated state. But also, you don't have to just say goodbye and cut them out of your life forever either.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you shared that, Bri, and I totally agree. And it's a difficult one to navigate, especially when life is busy and you're like, okay, but I only have so many hours to like be introducing more people or communities or whatever ever into my life. But it's a juggling act, and it's something that makes a world of difference when you've navigated through that. So you've obviously worked with a lot of high achieving women over the years, over the last decade. What patterns or beliefs do you see holding them back the most? And like, I'm really curious to know if there's something that you've seen that a lot of them have in common where they need to unlearn something in order to scale.
Yep. I mean, definitely one of the big ones is the one we already talked about, where their worth and their value is coupled with their productivity. I mean, that's a big one for high achievers. But I would say one of the other ones that I find with high achievers, there's two. One is, I think we tend to look a lot outside of us and say, oh, well, so-and-so is doing this with their business. Well, oh, so-and-so has a 7-figure business. And oh, so-and-so did that. And so-and-so, oh, Bri just mentioned an exitable business strategy. I think I need that. And we end up building these versions of success that we get to the end of. And we're like, this is not at all what I wanted or where I want to be. So the first thing I would say is, what is your definition of success? Turn off all the noise outside of you. And what is your definition of success? We've kind of talked about that a little bit throughout this podcast as well. Is like, you may not want to be a CEO, and that's totally fine. give yourself permission to want what you want. So that's the first thing. The mountain that you're climbing, got to be your mountain. If it's someone else's mountain, you are going to get to the end and you're going to be like, oh, now I have to deconstruct this entire mountain. Go find my mountain and now climb up that one. And it's exhausting. So give yourself permission now to assess the mountain you're climbing and make sure it's your mountain. The other thing I'll say that I see a lot of high achievers do is we are constantly moving the goalpost. You laugh because it's true. It's so true.
Yeah, as soon as you hit that goal that you thought you were never going to get, you've already like increased and it's already like not enough.
And then you don't celebrate it because your vision or your perspective is already past it. And it's, not enough. And you got to do more. But by the time you get to that one, guess what? You're not going to celebrate that one either because that one's not going to be enough because you've already moved the goalpost again. And so a lot of what I do with high achievers too is like really slow them down to say like, where am I today? What is my vision today? How am I going to know when that vision is my reality? And who is the me that's going to celebrate when I get there? Who is the me that's going to rest in that space for a period of time and let myself truly just like steep in and relish in the amazingness that I've created before I go run my next marathon, right? If you're trying to run a marathon, I am not a runner, so maybe I can't say this, but as far as I know, if you were to try to run a marathon every single day, every month, every quarter, every year for the rest of your life, I mean, imagine 365 marathons a year, like you would die. So you can't run a marathon every single day. Can you run? I'm trying to think of a distance. I don't run, so I don't know these things. Can you run 2 miles a day? Yeah, absolutely. You can run 2 miles a day and not wear yourself out. But like, go run to the ice cream shop, rest. You got there, have a thing of ice cream, celebrate yourself. And then when you're ready, you run again. And again and again. But that celebration piece, I ask my clients all the time, when's the last time you celebrated? And they're like, what? Or I'll be like, homework, go celebrate. And they're like, what do I, and then I'll be like, how'd you celebrate? And they're like, well, I sent this email. And I'm like, that's not, no, like actually go celebrate.
That's so funny. I do the same with my clients. And one of the things we try Rewire is like every week on our group calls at the end, they all have to share their wins for the week. And we do this twice a week. And it's so interesting when people come in initially, they're like, oh no, I don't have wins. And we're so used to not seeing all the little wins initially. And it's like reprogramming to see them. And then it's the celebration part. And you're so right. Like people struggle to celebrate. And it's so crucial. And I always think of like 80-year-old us looking back on our lives. Do we want to see those decades of building a business where it was like, oh damn, I didn't even enjoy the process. I didn't even celebrate all these milestones. I was just so hard on myself being like, okay, we got you, next goal, next goal, next goal. Instead of looking back and being like, oh my gosh, I remember when I celebrated this and my first order and my first wholesale contract and my first team member and all these little milestones. And I just see all these beautiful celebrations along the way. It makes such a difference.
I hosted a month ago a 10th birthday party for myself and my business. And I said on the call, I was like, the reason I'm doing this, yes, partially is for me, but also like it is my job and my responsibility to show my people what it looks like to be in celebration and to give themselves permission to celebrate the milestones and the steps. And so I hosted a 10th birthday party for my business and for myself.
Oh my goodness. I love that. I'm going to do that as well. That's so fun. Bri, this has been such a powerful conversation. Thank you so much for joining me. I feel like I could talk to you for hours on end. And I know your story and your advice is going to have really impacted a lot of listeners and they're going to want to follow along and support you. So where can our listeners find you and how can they support you?
My website is a really good place to start, and it's my name, briseeley.com, BRISEELEY.com. I also have my own podcast, which Robyn is going to be a guest on this fall. So make sure that you check out the Big Goal Energy podcast. And Big Goal Energy just became an app as well.
Amazing.
So go visit the Apple Store, the Android Store, wherever you get your apps, and type in Big Goal Energy and come join us on the app. There's a future self meditation in there. There's resources. There's freebies. There's every podcast episode is in there. There's a community. There's all sorts of stuff in there.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Bri. We will link all of those in the show notes so anyone listening can go follow along, connect, and check out the app and the meditations and everything in there. But thank you again so much for being here. And I cannot wait to be joining you on your podcast in a couple of months. It's going to be so, so fun.
Same.